Hey! Welcome to Fridays with Flora, and today it's going to be Flora and the Bees segment, because we are outside and we are in the garden and we've been doing a lot of spring cleanup, and today is probably going to be another spring cleanup day. And you can hear the birds chirping. It's going to be 55 after some cool gray days, so we're going to see some pollinators. And I wanted to share with you some spring cleanup tips that help to continue biodiversity and support the pollinators in your garden. And so there's some steps you want to take and some things you want to do to ensure that you've got your bees and your butterflies all happy and coming back to your yard all summer long. So the first step is doing a walkabout and being really observant. And what I mean is, usually gardeners do walkabouts all the time because they want to see what's coming up. They want to look at their garden journals. They want to see what's going to get moved. But this is a little bit of a different walkabout. You're really paying close attention to the pollinators that either have migrated recently and or are waking up under your leaves and debris that they've been overwintering under. And they're buzzing around and they're hungry and they're looking for food. And you want to keep an eye out for those bees in particular. If they're going under an area or under some leaves, you want to keep that area alone, because there's nesting, there's things going on. That's kind of their house. So that's the first thing. We're going to do a little walkabout. We're going to see if we see any bees and kind of make note of where they're hanging out so that we can leave them alone. Then we'll go to the next step. So I just saw a couple bumblebees go under these leaves. You can't really see them right now. So I'm going to leave these. There's a little fly over there too. You know, flies are pollinators as well, but so I'm going to leave those bumblebees alone under there. As you're doing your spring cleanup, you want to, just know where they're hanging out. So that's step number one. Now we're going to talk about leaves. All right, so now we got to talk about leaves. So if you were a good gardener for biodiversity last year in the fall, you mulched your leaves and you put them on your garden beds, and that's what you used to keep things warm. And the other thing that you did by doing that is you kept a nice warm spot for overwintering pollinators to hang out and sleep and nest and be all cozy. So yay for us. But now it's spring and we have a mess to clean up and we have flowers popping up. So after you've observed and figure out places where they're nesting, you also want to be careful of everywhere else. And you kind of want to poke around and just see and loosen up and clear up the areas gently where your plants are starting to pop up. These are the plant crowns. Some of them are going to be strong enough to pop through these leaves on their own. Some won't. Alliums, here's some alliums that are a little sad. They needed some help early on here. And we clean this bed out all the time, and the way the wind goes, it keeps pushing the leaves back in here. But you just, at the very least, you just want to go in and uncover your plant crowns. And don't clean out all the leaves and mulch them until you've had a week's worth of warm weather. Why? Because there's pollinators still in here sleeping and nesting. They will wake up and leave after about a week's worth of 50-degree days. And then you can mulch the heck out of these leaves and put them in a compost pile. The other thing you can do, if it really annoys you to get these leaves out of here, is don't mulch them. Clean them out, and actually my husband and I, you won't know from this area, but actually the rest of our beds are pretty cleaned out. We take all the leaves, we put them on a giant tarp, and we drag the tarp over to a woodland ravine, and we dump the leaves whole. And as undisturbed as we could, we dump them there, and they decompose naturally, and they're not mulched. They just hang out there undisturbed, and the pollinators can leave, when they feel like it. So that's what we do, and actually a lot of our neighbors do that too. So if you don't have a woodland river near you, you can just throw it in a pile in the back corner of your garden and just wait a couple weeks till it really warms up, and then you can go ahead and mulch and get rid of that pile. So that's the deal with the leaves. Less is more. All right, let's talk about pruning, because that is key to spring cleanup, and it's important, but it's also important to be safe with the bees. All right, pruning. This is a hydrangea, and hydrangeas are going to be different. They're either going to bloom on old wood or bloom on new wood. What's old wood and new wood, Flora? What are you talking about? Okay, so this is a perfect example of a plant that's growing on old wood. So you can see this is last year's growth. This is old growth. It's an established shrub. And you can see that there's some flower buds on the old growth. I do have new growth here, but generally speaking, it's still on the old growth. There is some new stuff. But most of it is on the old wood. Plants that grow on and bloom on old wood, generally speaking, you don't want to prune until after they've flowered. This is a huge generalization. I'm sure many gardeners out there are going to be commenting on all the exceptions to the rule. But generally speaking, flowers that bud on old wood have set the bud the year before. And these are shrubs that usually flower around May to June, give or take. So you don't really want to prune right now. If you see a lot of diseased and dead stems and that you really want to prune, okay, the 3 Ds. Disease, dead, and I'm forgetting the third one. Maybe someone can add that to the comments. But if you need to prune, prune high, meaning leave about 12 to 16 inches of the plant. Because again, pollinators use these stems for overwintering. So they might be sleeping and they might be hibernating in these stems. You don't want to go crazy with your pruning shears. So if you need to prune, prune high. And leave what you can. If you really, really need to prune hard at anything, wait till you've got a week's worth of warm weather. And if you really still need to prune before then, keep the twigs in a compost pile whole, don't mulch them yet, wrap them up in some string until you can rest assured the pollinators have left their homes. Let's talk about new wood. Okay, so this is rose mallow, but you wouldn't know it. Rose mallow comes up really late, and it's gonna come up right here in the dirt. It's all gonna be new growth. These are other plants coming up. I don't know what they are. I think they're actually either Rudbeckia or Echinacea, I'm not sure. But we're gonna have to move this guy. But you can see this is a lot of old wood, but there's no growth on it. All the new growth is gonna come from the base. And rose mallow is going to trick you into thinking that it's dead and it's not coming back, and then all of a sudden, come June, it's coming up. So she always makes me a little nervous, and then all of a sudden she just never disappoints me. She just makes me wait. But yeah, it's all gonna come from here. So plants that aren't going to grow on this old wood, you can cut back hard if you want. But again, at first, leave about 12 to 16 inches of plant at first, because there might be some hibernating pollinators in here. So prune high, less is more. The key to your spring cleanup to help the pollinators is less is more. So one thing we do need to talk about when it comes to our pollinators is weed and feed. So we're out, it's getting warmer, we want to tamp down our weeds, especially with our lawns, and we also want to feed our plants. Now feeding is the easy part, right? Compost is best, but there's lots of other things you can get on the market, but I really want to talk about pesticides and chemicals for our weeds and your lawns in particular. So the bees are awake and they're hungry, and it's important to have flowering spring ephemerals and spring native flowers for them. They will also stop by your weeds, and that means, you know, either it's a plant that's totally a viable plant, it's just in the wrong space for you, or it's really, pardon me, a weed like a dandelion, or violets, which is also a native, and they like violets too. So they're stopping by for that nectar, and you're not liking, let's just say, the dandelions. So there's a lot of debate online around the dandelions. How nutritional are they? They're actually not that nutritional, but they do give the bees some food. So you're putting pesticides down in early spring, and you're really hurting the bees. So a couple things. If you can try and avoid May putting poison down, that would be great. If you really need to put down poison, try and mow first and then put your poison down, because you don't want the pesticide to land on that dandelion flower where the bee's gonna go, and it's going to ingest that pesticide. So I understand your need for getting rid of weeds in your pretty little lawn. I do. We have lawns. My husband's way into lawns. But we are also using a lot of non-toxic chemical concoctions. He's actually putting together right now a vinegar dish soap thing. I don't know. There's a lot of options online. Take a look. Some are really intense. You know, there's a concoction we're gonna try, which is vinegar, dish soap, and salt, but nothing's gonna grow in that area once we treat it with that. So do be careful, know what you're putting down, but there are lots of other non-toxic approaches that you can do that's going to not completely hurt your biodiversity in your space. So I urge you to do that. I urge you to, if you really need to put down some chemicals, mow first, okay? You're gonna help your bees. They need some help. Their numbers are dwindling. So that is the straight talk about pesticides. Now lawns, there's a big movement right now called No Mow May, which if you can do it, try not to mow in May. Let your grass grow. If your neighbors can deal with it too, they might be like, what are you doing? But a lot of native plants are going to have a resurgence during the month of May, and it's really going to help the pollinators, and it exponentially blows up your pollen count for your bees. So check it out. It's called No Mow May. You might want to talk to your neighbors about it. Maybe the neighborhood can just agree to do that for the month of May, and then you can go back to mowing and taking care of your lawn. So just little moves, little changes, and you can do a lot. So that's the scoop on weed and feed and lawns. So that pretty much covers spring cleanup for pollinators. I think the final thing I would like to tell you is use this time. You know, the garden's just getting started, okay? Once summer happens, it's like it goes from crawling to running. So you've got some time right now to even do some extra craft projects for the pollinators, meaning, you know, work with the kids on maybe a bird feeder. Work with the kids on maybe figuring out what kind of nesting material you can put out for them. And make sure it's all natural. There's nothing, you know, man-made in that stuff. Also create some bird baths, create some pollinator baths by just upcycling a little bowl and putting some rocks in. So now's the time to maybe get some craft projects underway to help the pollinators, so you're ready to go next month. You can pop those bird feeders, pop those bird baths, pop those things into your garden, and then you're all set. Because they need us, our pollinators need us. They're in trouble. And now with these murder hornets, who knows what's gonna happen. So we need to do our part in our garden. So anyway, thank you for joining me on this gorgeous, gorgeous spring day in the garden. Thank you for your interest in helping our pollinators. And thank you for stopping by. If you are interested in what we're doing here, subscribe below. That button helps everybody here. And if you are also interested in more about native plants and helping the pollinators, this has been a journey for me for the past 1.5 years, and I've self-published a few books, and I'm working on another book right now. But go on Amazon.com. There's a bee native Midwest plant book. There's a children's book that I did to teach kids about all the pollinators, just not the bees and the butterflies. There's lots of different pollinators out there. And then there's a quick top 20 butterfly favorites. So take a look and see if you can pop some of these beauties into your garden. They will make a huge difference. Anyway, I think that's it. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you in a couple weeks. We'll see what we're gonna be up to then. Please stay safe, be well. I know many of us are still in quarantine losing our minds, which is why you guys need to get in the garden with me, all right? Mwah! See you in a couple weeks.